Hi, I'm Chike Coleman. That's Sanford Hess, and this is Real Reviews Home Edition, the show where we talk about movies from our homes and tell you about them. This week, we are kind of continuing the summer theme for
Sure, yeah,
movie.
I'll give you
It's
that.
not summer camp anymore, but we're
Right.
continuing the summer movie theme that started way back in May.
Well, May
Or,
was in that Kung Fu month.
oh yeah, May was Kung Fu month, so it technically started in June. So this week we're going to be talking about two very amazing movies. One uh, has a name that we will all by now know, Alexander Hamilton. We're talking about Hamilton this week because it just arrived on Disney Plus for you to stream and watch. And we're also talking about one of my favorite summer movies of 1998. Although, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think it came out in the summer, did it?
Ooh, hang
Did
on.
it not? I
I
can't
don't know.
remember.
Doesn't matter. Actually,
Doesn't
yes, it
matter.
was July of 1998. There you go.
July of 1998, released on video, I believe, in October of that year.
Sounds about right.
And that's The Mask of Zorro, one of my favorite movies from childhood. But first, we're going to talk about Hamilton. And Sanford's going to tell you what the plot is. Go
Wow.
ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to try to condense the plot into a very short summary because
Do what you can, but don't forget the Schuyler sisters.
yeah, the most amazing part, of course, is that it's a true story. And I'll just start with a little bit of the history of the play. So, Lin-Manuel Miranda was reading the biography of Alexander Hamilton, and I read this biography too. And I just want to say right up front, the biography is fabulous. And if you are in
Okay.
any way a fan of the play, you have got to read the biography. Okay, so Alexander Hamilton led this incredible life, and Lin-Manuel Miranda did a very good job in condensing a lot of it into the movie. So, the movie, or I'm sorry, in the show. So in the show starts off with a little bit of a narrative to tell us about the history of Alexander Hamilton, who was born in the islands. I want to say close to Barbados. He was born in very poor, sort of bad circumstances. His mother died early. His father ran away. He had a series of bad luck incidents, which they cover in the introductory song. But the key is that there was a hurricane that demolished a lot of the island, and he wrote a journal about that and got quite some renown for his writing. And some people actually did put some money together and send him to New York to go study at what was then called King's College. So he arrived in New York just before the American Revolution. Now, here the play does take some liberties with what went on, but basically, he arrived and he wound up volunteering for the army. He served in an artillery unit and actually was involved in a couple of exciting things early. He was involved with stealing some cannons from the British at one point. Now, the
Right.
play here has him meeting some other characters, and it's an excuse to create some brotherhood and all this. Now, that part of the play is not quite historically accurate, but the characters who he meets do appear in the book, so each of them is true, and that includes Lafayette, who was, of course, a important part of the army under General Washington. Um, and then also Hercules Mulligan, who is a real person, although not nearly as much a part of the story. He just has a really great name. And wow, I'm blanking on his friend from South Carolina. But anyway, the book and the real story and the play then take us into meeting George Washington. And meeting George Washington is obviously one of the key moments of his life. He became basically the right-hand man to George Washington. Now that he did resent that, and that also is represented in the play, he wanted to be part of the army, not doing all the paperwork, but he was
Right.
excellent at the paperwork, and so he was doing that. And as Chike noted, at that point in his life, he also met the Schuyler sisters, who were real people. Their father was a well-known actual general in the American Revolution, but he met the sisters at the same time. There was the older sister, Angelica, and the middle sister, Eliza, who he wound up marrying, although, of course, his relationship with Angelica was tortured. And throughout history, there have been people who thought that actually it's possible that he and Angelica even had their own relationship.
Right.
So the show and then takes us through the culmination of the Revolutionary War, which actually I visited this site. It's pretty amazing. He did rejoin the army on the front lines for this almost the last battle at Yorktown, and he
Wow.
did lead a charge where it's an amazing story. They had to lead a charge. They did not have the ability to shoot. They did not take bullets because they were afraid that anybody shooting a bullet by accident would give them away. So they actually attacked.
What?
Yeah, they attacked with just their bayonets, and that's part of the song about that. If you read the lyrics, and obviously the lyrics are a huge part of the story here. Anyway, so consolidating what happens next, he joins George Washington's presidency as the Secretary of the Treasury. He does so much incredible stuff in terms of setting the country on a new path with economic foundation, which is ingeniously portrayed in the show, in the series of rap battles in the
Yes.
cabinet with Thomas Jefferson, who comes on right after intermission, and one of the show-stopping moments. I'm not even mentioning King George's part. I'll throw that over to you to talk about later. Um, Now, the second half of the play and the second half of his life actually took a relatively dark turn. Some really bad events happen in his life, starting with him getting blackmailed after cheating on his wife with somebody who was essentially entrapped him. Then the next huge and horrible event in his life was that his son was killed in a duel,
Yeah.
and then even though he basically the condensed version in the show, he was essentially out of favor with the anybody who was the ruling party, whether it was John Adams or Thomas Jefferson. He became a very minor figure, but was still played some role. And then ultimately, of course, the end of the show, he wound up in a duel with then Vice President Aaron Burr and was killed, and leads to the show's sort of culmination where his wife Eliza talks about what all the things that he could have done and how she lived his life to tell his story.
Hmm.
And actually, one of the things that I watched it with my wife, whose name is Elizabeth, and she pointed out to me that people are saying that there's a moment at the end of the show where she sort of looks into the audience and gasps. And there's an interpretation that I really love, that she told me that here, in a sense, there's a breaking of the fourth wall, because she is actually looking out at the audience and realizing that she is telling his story. Um,
Oh
yeah, isn't that
wow.
cool? So that's how the show ends, and it ends on kind of a down note. I mean, it's not a big rousing finish, but it ends in the appropriate way, because obviously that is the way his life ended.
Yeah.
So that is my best job at culminating 2.5 hours of very.
Bravo.
Yeah, thank you. So Chike, I'll tee it up like this. I mean, I'm a American history buff. I'm a Revolutionary War buff. I love rap. I hate musicals, but I love this one. I mean, that's all there is to it. So I thought this. I saw the show live. I listened to the cast album many times with my son,
Mhm.
and seeing the actual original cast performing on this was really an amazing experience, given how familiar I was with the show.
I loved this movie so much. I actually, like you, have a history with the movie or with Hamilton as the play, as well as I saw it in Chicago, like you. Presumably either with the same Chicago cast or maybe an entirely different one. Who knows? As
Uh,
there's always understudies for everything.
Yeah, I know that the lead Miguel Cervantes is I don't know, he was doing it for a while. I will say this. This is you ready for this one? He's
Yeah.
better than Lin Manuel Miranda.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean that's the
I
one of the negatives of this movie, is that Lin Manuel Miranda is amazing at the writing and all that, but he's really not that great a singer.
I mean, for me, the person in the theater, because we can do compare and contrast now,
Yeah,
had much more of a swagger than Lin Manuel Miranda at any given time. At any given time.
yeah,
The rest of the original cast completely outpaces everybody that I saw in Chicago,
right, right.
including the Schuyler sisters. and
Yeah.
those women kill it every time you you hear the original performance. You're like, nobody else can touch this. No
Nope.
one.
Nope.
I love this movie. I love it for the fact that it tells a true story. I love how they tell this true story. I love what they incorporate to do so. Not just the idea of singing and rapping and there being conflict, but it's a visual conflict you can see because the stage rotates and moves during specific different scenes. And then all of a sudden, King George comes in. And I don't know how to, what is the proper way to say this? King George takes you out of the entire thing that you're watching because he's like the running commentary for the audience's head, and you don't care because he's just so funny. And you really don't have other funny moments in this play other than King George's entrances.
Right.
And you know, anytime he makes an expression toward the audience, it's going to be funny. Let's even forget the fact that he spits every time he talks, which is genius. Um, there are other scenes that are hilarious, like I believe it is the Schuyler sister that Hamilton married, doing a beat for the son because the son is now explaining all that he has learned. That's hilarious and brilliant, and it makes you think there's no end to these actors and actresses' talents, which in truth there really isn't. These people are phenomenal.
Right.
Um, I love the fact that, like you said, it ends on a dour note, and I love that you learn something from it. You can be almost any age, almost any age. I would say 8 and up can learn something from this show. Beware, there is one curse word in the entire play, but beyond that, it's amazing, and everybody should be seen and educated by it, and learn from it, and learn from its history.
Right. And also, I mean, one of the things that's great about it too is, especially if you're talking about young kids and all that, it has an intermission. So, I mean, even though it's a 2.5 hour show, there's a very natural place to stop, pause, watch it in two halves, or take a break, come back. I too many long movies could use an intermission. So,
Okay,
hey, a couple things. I just want to one or two things I noted about it on watching it on Disney. Number one, there's a lot of shots where you get, like you mentioned, the staging, and the staging, some parts of this the staging is incredible. There's the rotating stage and the way they use that and the duels and things like that, but the close-ups that they got of the actors and actresses,
yeah,
great. I mean, you would never get that at a stage performance, and they were using some kind of camera that got these close-ups from far away, but they did a great job intermixing that in with yet watching from sort of the audience's view, where you do see all the staging at once. So
right.
I thought that was a really nice touch in terms of.
And there are some faraway shots. And I guess my final question to you regarding this, we both clearly love it, is do you want more theater experiences filmed and shot in this way?
Hmm. I think so. I mean, I think in this case, you would use it as an example to say it does a great service to future generations because it captures the original cast, or it captures something about in this, I mean, obviously in these days of touring shows, they sort of have the ability to bring it to
Yeah,
you. But one of the reasons that this movie existed, because they had the ability to get that original cast on film. And
yeah,
that, I do think that, I mean, and I think that especially as we've talked about, as they move more towards this home watching market for these things, I think there is going to be a market for that. And certainly Broadway, if they really got their act together in the very short term,
yeah.
they would
I
stick
would
some
hope for
cameras
that.
up and
That's what
start
I'm
filming
looking for.
everything right now and saying, hey, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I do. I hope that, and I thought that they did a really good job, not just in the filming, but also the sound was great. I mean, it was live sound. It wasn't like the soundtrack.
Hmm.
So all aspects of it really felt like you were at the theater. So
Hmm.
huge credit to all the people who are behind this production.
Well, I don't really have a great transition for
Yeah.
this now, other than
Okay, next movie.
we go from a man trying to make history to a hero within the Latino community that's been a part of history for a long time for our next movie, and that's 1998's The Massacre of Zorro, directed by Martin Campbell, starring Antonio Banderas, Catherine Zeta-Jones, Matt Lanter, Antonio, or not Antonio Banderas, Anthony Hopkins, and I forget what the other name of the other guy is, but it basically centers on uh, Diego Diego de la Vega. He is a thief who, as a child, sees Zorro battling his nemesis, who I suppose is just, I guess, a count at the time?
He was a Don also. Yeah,
A Don,
Don
a Don
Raphael.
at the time. And he sees Zorro triumph over his enemy once again, and that gives him hope and joy and happiness. And Zorro goes home to his wife, who is a beautiful, brilliant woman, and they live in a very luxurious cave, the most luxurious cave from 1998 that you've ever seen. And essentially, the Don follows Zorro there, which why the Don didn't do this ages ago, I don't know. Doesn't make sense. You could have.
Because he had the temerity to embarrass Don Raphael
Oh,
and
so all you had to wait
speak
for
on
was
his
for
neck.
him to be embarrassed by carving the Z.
Yeah.
Um. Anyway, Zorro gets found out by this Don in a scuffle where he is fighting the Don. Zorro's wife is killed. His daughter is stolen by the Don, raised as his own. Years later, the children who idolize Zorro become thieves. During the process of being thieves, the brother of Diego de la Vega is beheaded, literally with a sword, by a captain who
Captain
is
Love.
smug and pompous and works for that now much older Don. Because he's devastated by the death, he goes to a bar and he drinks. Antonio Banderas' character, who's escaped from the prison he was thrown in, because he was thrown in prison after his wife was killed, framed basically for killing his wife. Can we say that? Can we say that's why he was thrown in jail?
When you're a dictator, you don't need a reason to throw people in prison. You know.
Oh, hello, Black Lives Matter movement. Um, So essentially, after getting free and watching this guy be angry and be in a drunken stupor about his brother's death, he says, "I'll train you, but you have to learn to act with class, learn to disguise yourself, put yourself among those people that you despise, and when the time is right, attack." And of course, Antonio Banderas' character is too drunk and angry to really do that, so he challenges Zara to a duel, loses the duel, then finds Antonio Banderas' cave after he realizes, yeah, I really do want to take this guy down, and does it the smart way through the inner sanctum of the Dons, posing himself as a Don, but also in the process falling in love with a now adult Elena. Um, Elena doesn't seem to want to hear the horrible things about his supposed father, and it takes a while before she cottons on to the fact that this guy is not her real father, and that her real father is the now much older Zorro. So then it becomes a square off between the captain who killed Diego de la Vega's brother and Don and the older Zorro squaring off one last time as a plot about the combination of California and New Mexico becoming one single entity happens in the background of the story plot. I'm not even going to bother telling you who wins or loses. You know how this is supposed to go.
It's a summer movie.
Zorro gets the girl, and unfortunately, older Zorro dies, and the older villain dies, and the captain who killed the brother dies. It's really cut and pasted at that point. But it's the journey to get there that is so dang on fascinating. And Martin Campbell, who also directed Goldeneye before this and Casino Royale after this, did a fantastic job directing this movie. And I will say there are very few, in my mind, Latino Latinx uh, heroines for people of that culture and of that race to look up to. Zorro is the mainstay, and this movie was very successful because of that, because people could see themselves in this hero, mask or no. And I think this was the role, in my mind, that cemented Antonio Banderas as a star. And it's a playful movie, and it's a fun movie, and there's humor and a little bit of passion, but
How
like
can you not have passion with Catherine Zeta-Jones in it?
I mean, come on, it's Catherine Zeta-Jones. Um, and I love it for that. What did you think of this movie?
Well, I hadn't seen this movie. I don't think I saw it since close to when it came out. Yeah, I this movie to me, I would agree with you. This is a summer movie. It's a fun movie. I was struck by two things. I was struck first of all by the charisma of the leads. Antonio Banderas, like you said, this if he wasn't already a star, this was what a role for him. It's like
And
this.
he's not, and he's one of those guys that you would think, okay, he's ruggedly handsome, he should be Zorro, but they don't play him as that, and that's half of what makes it amazing.
Right. And and he does, he plays the character well. He plays the character pretending to be somebody else well. He's got star power. There's no and Catherine Zeta-Jones smolders on the screen, and the two of them seem to have some good chemistry together. So that part was great. The other thing that struck me though is that this movie it felt like such a throwback in terms of the stunts. There were whole sequences where it's like trick riding on horses and
Yeah.
fall. I mean, it felt like a 1950s movie in terms of the kinds of stunts it had. And it didn't really have like special effects. It didn't have anything computer generated. It was a wonderful throwback in terms of that experience. I was sitting back going, wow, this guy, I mean, look at these guys ride. This is fabulous. They're jumping up and down and back and forth and flipping around on the horses. And, for me, that was really a fun part of this movie was to see that part of it.
Now, did you enjoy the movie? Would you recommend it?
Yeah, I would recommend it. It was long. It was longer than it needed to be. Now, in this case, just sort of a watching from home note. I had the option to pay for this movie or to watch it free on IMDb TV.
What did you
So
do?
I watched it on IMDb TV because I'd never watched a movie there before, and it was with their commercials. And there was like maybe one commercial every three. Well, not three. I'm sorry. There's one commercial maybe every 10 or 15 minutes. But that slowed it down too much, and they really had bad timing on cutting it for commercials. So
Oh,
just as
geez.
a watching from home note, I should have paid $3 and watched it without commercials. But no, it felt like it dragged. I especially the last fight scene where like you referenced, there's sort of the two different sword fights going on. That really felt like it went on too long.
The cutting back and forth really slowed that down. I'm not going to disagree with you on that at all. I
Yeah.
also love the horse. Can I just say that the horse is
Yeah, the horse. No, I mean the horse. That was a great running gag. The way the horse kind of treated him, didn't quite. The horse sort of disrespected him, which
yes.
I thought that was a great gag. Um, Now, okay, so now we got to talk about what you teased last time, the accents. I mean, Antonio Banderas is doing an Antonio Banderas accent and fits in well. Catherine Zeta-Jones, who's Welsh, tries to do an accent. So,
I
okay.
forgot that she's Welsh,
Yeah, yeah.
but yes,
And then Anthony Hopkins is speaking in King's
complete
British
regular
English.
Irish classic tones. But you believe it entirely. As a kid, you believe it entirely. As an adult, you just don't care.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta put all that stuff in the background and say, okay, obviously there's forget cultural appropriation. There's none of that here. This is just straight up, here's Anthony Hopkins
Yes,
transplanted into this set. So that part was amusing, amusing.
very much so, very much so. And I would like to say the sets and the practical explosions were amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I mean that old timey part of it, like the full size sets and whatever that gold mine kind of set was, that was pretty
Dang, yeah,
substantial.
the gold mine is amazing.
Yeah. So yeah,
So would
I'd recommend. I mean, I recommend it more in the. I mean, here we are picking movies for the pandemic, so I'd recommend it more in that sense that if you've never seen this and you want a little escapist fantasy, this is the kind of movie that just takes you out of whatever you're in and plops you into its world, and then carries you through from start to finish.
yeah, but
So
avoid the sequel at all costs. It's not great.
yeah, I don't even know if I saw the sequel.
Oh, you
Now I
should.
was, I got to say that you mentioned the decapitation of his brother. It's amazing kind of how violent some of these 90s movies are in a way that sticks out. I don't think Disney would ever have a movie these days where you have a decapitated head in a jar
in a
of water.
jar.
That was a little excessive.
Yeah, no. Mm-mm.
So
But I
how
love
about
them all the same.
yeah?
So we both clearly like both films this week, which is not a rarity for us. And
We're
we
happy
both
to have loved them.
recommend them for different reasons. Um, but unfortunately, unlike the previous weeks, I have no idea what to say that we're going to tease to watch next week. All I can say is tune in. We will be back, and we will be talking movies. So until that time, I'm Chike Coleman. That's Sanford Hess. We will see you next week. Bye, guys.